Hi, this video is going to walk you through some of the updates to the Spring 2016 MStep assessment. Let's get started. In the spring of 2015, the state of Michigan launched a new assessment option, online assessment. Paper and pencil tests were still available, but the transition to online assessments had begun. The new online tests in math and ELA consisted of a combination of SBAC created items and Michigan field tested items. The field tested items then went to a review cycle for the following year's assessment. You can expect that the upcoming Spring 2016 assessment to again include SBAC and Michigan field tested items. There have been some notable changes between the 2015 and 2016 tests that you will want to be aware of. First, in 2015, the online test was a fixed form assessment for all subjects. This means students progressed through the assessment at their own discretion, skipping around even from question to question until the entire assessment was complete. In 2016, the Science and Social Studies tests will remain a fixed form assessment. However, the math and ELA assessments will be a computer adaptive test. In other words, the test will change or adapt to match the skill level demonstrated on the most recently submitted response or group of responses. This is similar to an NWEA MAP test. In 2015, there were 3 parts to all ELA and math assessments. This year, in 2016, the testing requirements have been reduced, removing all classroom activities and limiting the ELA performance task to only 5th and 8th grades. A math performance task will remain a requirement for all grades 3 through 8. In 2015, once a testing ticket was used to commence a session, that session had to be completed that day. If a test was not completed, it was locked and administrative interventions were required in order for a student to complete testing. In 2016, however, tests will not be locked if not completed within the day it was commenced. Now students' tests will remain open and available for testing until the student ends or submits the test. Their tests are unlimited and totally student-paced. There are some things that will remain the same from 2015 to 2016. First, the Science and Social Studies tests will remain the same fixed form assessment with Michigan developed content. The Math and ELA tests will remain a combination of Michigan field tested items and SBAC developed items. Another thing that is not changing from 2015 to 2016 is the availability of universal, designated, and online accommodation supports. You may remember that universal supports are offered to everyone, while designated and accommodated supports should mirror either daily classroom supports, regardless of special education status, or be listed on an IEP or 504. These must be enabled by an administrator, so be sure to communicate any designated or accommodated supports before testing times. Here's an overview of each grade level's tests and the estimated testing times for grades 3 through 8. Remember, the listed testing times are only estimates. Students have unlimited time to complete their assessments even if it carries over to another school day. Here are a few things you can do to prepare for the upcoming MStep assessment. First, talk to your students and parents about the assessment. Recently, they may have received a scorecard from last year's MStep, so this might be a great time to talk to them about the new changes and what the assessment means for your student and your school. Remember to put them at ease. This is only one measure of many that we use to gather a full picture of how their child is progressing in school. Discuss the testing schedule with your administration and staff. Consider your district's bandwidth availability as well as your classroom access to technology when creating a schedule. Once the schedule is set, communicate it to all stakeholders, including parents and students, so that they can avoid making appointments on those important testing days. have your students access the online practice tests. On the following slide, quick access links will be displayed to help your students easily access these tests. Have your students practice their typing skills and mouse trackpad skills. Students will be asked to click, drag and drop, and scroll numerous times during their assessment, in addition to typing short and long answer responses. Let's take a peek at how to access the practice assessments. The first link below will allow your students to easily access the MStep practice assessments and online performance tasks. In addition to displaying the access link to students, you may want to use it in a newsletter to parents, encouraging them to see what their child will experience this spring. You must use the Chrome browser in order to access this assessment. The second link will take you to a listing of performance task printouts, scoring guides, and rubrics. Let's follow the first link to see what you will be accessing. When you click on the practice assessment link, a blue screen should be displayed. This screen should offer sample items, calculator practice, and supports and accommodations. Please note that it states that a TSM is required next to supports and accommodations. This means in order for a student to practice using the designated supports and accommodations before testing day, they will have to access the practice test directly through the testing app on their device. All universal supports, however, are accessible on the practice test items through Chrome and on the TSM version of the practice test. To access a particular grade level, simply click on Sample Item Sets and then select your grade level and your test. Once you select a test, students will be asked to log in. They will use the sample username and password. Please remind students that on testing day, they will receive a ticket with a username and password to log in. Students will progress through clicking the Continue button and the Next button. They will select the sample items or the performance tasks they would like to view. And then progress by clicking Next. Students will be walked through a tour of the test, showing them how to progress from question to question and how to use the universal supports. When they arrive at the green button stating Begin the Test, they may click on it to start the practice. Students might notice right away that the test is slightly different for math and ELA than it was for last year. Last year, students had the ability to move from question to question in a drop-down menu at the top. They also were able to navigate back and forth with Next and Back buttons on the bottom. This year, due to the adaptive nature of the test, once a student enters an answer and clicks Next, they will receive a warning. The warning lets them know that once they move to the next question, they may not go back to the previous question. They have an option here to return to the previous question and change the response, or move to the next question and lock the response in. Once I move to the next question, I do not have a back button to move to the previous question, and I may not use the question drop-down that was there last year to move to the previous question. Again, this is only for the math and ELA tests. Students will be able to move around in the fixed form science and social studies tests. Another thing to note is that when a student is taking an ELA sample assessment, they will be provided groups of questions that relate to a particular passage. So they will not receive the warning to lock their answers in until they get to the end of that passage set. For example, in this ELA Grade 3 sample item, question 1 is in a set of 6. When the student progresses to question 6 and hits Next, they will then receive the warning that they need to lock in their responses and progress to the next question, or return to the responses and edit them in order to lock them in. Returning to our practice test links, if you click on the second link with the PT at the end, It will take you to the Michigan Department of Education listing of the different sample performance tasks for classroom instruction. Here you will receive performance task worksheets for students, which are essentially printouts of the online version of the test. You will also have scoring guides and rubrics to help you understand how students will be scored. Well, this concludes our 2016 assessment overview. If you would like a copy of this presentation slideshow, you may access it through the link displayed above, bit.ly/MStep overview.